Hello, my name's Tim Williamson and I'm a partner in a letting agency called Key-Lets, based here in Ayrshire in Scotland. And I want to have a quick few minutes of your time to talk about what is guaranteed rent. Now, guaranteed rent sounds absolutely brilliant. Can't lose, guaranteed, sounds great. But what is it? And it's amazing how many landlords don't even know what guaranteed rent is, don't even think they can guarantee their rent. And so just to clarify a few things, because it is a term that gets bandied about in the industry quite a lot, maybe not so much outside the industry, but certainly within it. And there are basically three areas that talk about guaranteed rent. Now, one you'll find is insurance companies. I think Direct Line, for example, will talk about guaranteed rent. And what they're talking about here is payment of rent when there's a claim. So if you've had a flood or a fire or something, you carry on getting your rent whilst the property is being sorted out. Now, some insurance policies also cover new accommodation for the tenant who's been affected by the catastrophe that's happened. But this isn't the kind of guaranteed rent that I wish to talk about, so that's just one aspect of it. I mean, there is another one where you get a rent guarantee arrangement. Now, some people may have heard of councils, certainly, who take on some properties for their housing list because they have got enough three-bedroom properties for whatever, and so they'll come to an arrangement where they'll lease a property from a private landlord, take over the full responsibility of it, rent it out to their own tenants, pay a sum of money, usually below market rent, but just depends obviously where it is, and then hand that back after so many years in some kind of condition. I've heard bad stories, and I've heard good stories about that kind of arrangement. And there is another letting agency and one or two other letting, in fact one I can think of in particular, who uses this model where they'll pay you X amount of money below market rent. They will then take on board the management of your property, so basically you're handing it over to them. They will find whichever tenants they can find, get as much money as can out of them, and at the end of the day, obviously, they make the profit on the difference between the rent they charge and the money they're paying you. There are questions about whether the building insurance and other elements of handing over your property. I mean, is your mortgage provider going to be happy with that? What happens if somebody damages themselves? Whose liability is it? Is it the agencies or is it the owner of the property? So there's a number of question marks, as well as obviously this issue of getting less rent. But the argument against for it is that you avoid void periods. Both this arrangement gives you that opportunity to have continuous rental income over a set amount of time, so long as whoever it is that you're putting a house with is a solid proposition in the first place and not just going to disappear as soon as a problem occurs. Councils are pretty good for that. They're good for looking after your property in that sense and paying. But anyway, another story. So the one I want to talk about really today is rent and legal protection, which guarantees the rent if the tenant defaults. Now, this is an insurance policy, and basically it's something that we've been using for many years, but it does mean that the tenants have to be vetted by the company who is going to offer the cover that pays the rent if the tenants default. So the underwriters are taking the hit if things go wrong, so consequently the referencing has to be done to a very high standard. You do pay for this, by the way, or we actually pay for it, but landlords can be charged for this down south. And there is a difference here also. I want to point out that I have heard of tenants being charged for this kind of insurance, but that tends to be in England, whereas in England and Wales, not Scotland, tenants can be charged for these things, but in Scotland it's illegal to actually make this kind of charges, which they call premiums, to a tenant when it comes to anything to do with them acquiring or living in a property. So just be clear that this isn't a cost that you can pass over to the tenant in Scotland. You can put the cost against your tax. It is an allowable expense, as any insurance policy is, and so although it costs just over £100 a year, maybe £150 depending on the level of cover you want, it is a very sensible thing to take out. But it does mean, as I say, the referencing has to be done really, really well, and usually done by the actual company who's going to be insuring and underwriting the risk. So the companies that we use are Letsure, and we certainly have used Ensley in the past. There are other companies out there. They all have slightly different rules and regulations as to how the tenant qualifies or not. And certainly, the way we work is that we prefer to protect the landlord's income rather than give the landlord all the risk. So rent guarantee, if there's a problem, pays out. And we know it pays out because on the few occasions we've had to use it, it certainly has been worthwhile. And you'll see on our webpage we have one of our landlords, Sandra, who had the unfortunate experience of a tenant who was, she started off missing a few payments and paying part of it, and then eventually stopped paying. And the thing about these insurance policies is that they also have legal costs as well included into the cover. So consequently, the costs of the solicitors, etc., are borne by the insurance company. So Sandra ended up with 11 months of hassle, if you like. Well, she didn't, we did, because we did it for her, we managed it. And at the end of the day, each month she was being paid the rent through the insurance. The tenant, unfortunately, was racking up, and the guarantor were racking up costs. And at the end of the day, that wasn't the landlord's problem. So 11 months, she could have lost a lot of money in terms of not only the rent, but also her legal costs. And although it didn't go to court, it went very close to it. And that is often the way, I understand, for tenants will basically drag things out to the point where they get offered a council house or just walk away before they go to court. Because, as I understand it, a tenant who goes to court and there's the court finds obviously the eviction is required, then you can carry that on your credit rating for ever and a day. Needed to check on that, but I'm pretty sure that's certainly what I've heard in the past. So going to court is obviously a really, really dire thing. And to be fair, in 20 years as a letting agent, we've never been to court once. So, touch wood, we won't do that. Okay, so rent guarantee doesn't cost a lot of money, saves you a hell of a lot of money if things go wrong. How often do things go wrong? Not a lot. In all honesty, it isn't. But you just don't know who that tenant is who is going to stop paying. Circumstances change. They lose their job. They get ill. There are a percentage, and we've come across one in 20 years, who moves into a property and doesn't pay. In a good job, just doesn't pay. I can't understand it, but she didn't. And the rental protection kicked in, and she left after about 4 months. So, these are problems that landlords can obviously experience. And Sandra is a prime example. She only has one property. It was her home that she wanted to rent out. She moved into a partner's home. And so consequently, these things are, you just don't know where it's going to come at you. So, like any insurance policy, it is worth taking out because you're protecting, a lot of money and a lot of hassle. And I would definitely recommend it, which is why we do it. It does mean, though, you'll discard a lot of tenants who don't meet that criteria. Now, as a responsible letting agent, and we have a long-term view of rentals and working with our landlords, we are looking to make sure that the landlords are not going to be the ones that get hurt here. Now, you don't have to take out the insurance. To me, I'm surprised landlords choose not to take out the insurance. But, this is something you put against your tax. It pays out if there's a problem. It seems to be the most sensible thing to do. But vetting the tenants to that standard means that even if you don't take out the insurance, find that the tenants have been vetted to the highest standard you can get. And so, really, we tend to have very few problems as opposed to some of our competitors who seem to have endless problems. Now, that applies for working tenants as much as housing benefit tenants. Housing benefit tenants get paid directly, unless there's a problem. Maybe they can't handle cash or got a drug issue or whatever. The arrangements nowadays are obviously that tenants get paid directly. Universal credits are coming in soon. They'll be paid everything directly. And certainly the feedback from other landlords is that they're having a nightmare not getting paid. Now, with housing benefit tenants, not only do we go for a guarantor, but we get the guarantor to make sure that the tenants qualify for rental guarantee, rental protection and legal insurance. Let's say for just over £100, to me it's a no-brainer. Our own properties have tenants in with rental guarantee. And so that is what rental guarantee is. The reason you probably haven't heard about it is it means that if you do the vetting of your tenants in-house, so you go to a letting agent and they don't actually outsource it, they'll just do everything in-house to keep the costs down, it means then that the landlord is totally exposed because you don't have that opportunity. You're not being given that opportunity to take out an insurance policy against default. So to me, we'd rather look after our landlords, keep that long-term relationship going, and anyone who doesn't consider rental protection, then especially if you know about it, you really are missing a trick. So what I would suggest is go on to our webpage, check out obviously Sandra's experience. There are links there let you know about other policies that you can take out in terms of rental protection with some of the other insurers, and then you can always give us a ring or email. More than happy to talk to you. And certainly if you've got a situation where you're with a letting agent and you haven't got rental protection and never been offered it, then maybe you really should start considering whether that agent is actually doing the best thing for you. In fact, I even have a little e-book, or e-brochure I should say, put together to ask those sort of questions of existing letting agents and compare them to how we do things. Okay, well, I hope that's been of interest and of benefit. But it's one of the things that are absolutely crucial, as far as I'm concerned. If you're going to rent out a property, unless you're a high risk taker, I would suggest rental protection is definitely the thing for you. Okay, bye for now.